The escape. A red sun hung low in the sky, casting a strange glow over the dense jungle. Thick, twisted trees reached toward the sky, their dark branches moving like claws. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and strange flowers. Somewhere in the distance, a low hum filled the air. It was the sound of hunter drones, and they were getting closer. Zaira ran. Her breath was fast. Her legs burned, but she could not stop. She leaped over fallen logs, dodged sharp thorns, and forced herself forward. The fabric of her long royal cloak was torn, stained with mud and blood. She had been running for hours, but no matter how far she went, she could hear them, her own people, hunting her like an animal. A voice crackled in her earpiece. "Princess Zaira, surrender now. There is no escape. Your father has commanded your return." She gritted her teeth. Her father, the emperor, the man who had ruled the galaxy with fear, the man who had ordered her to commit a terrible act, an act she had refused. And now, because of that, she was a traitor. The jungle ended suddenly. Zaira skidded to a stop at the edge of a steep cliff. Below, a dark river rushed between jagged rocks. She had no way forward. Behind her, she could hear the footsteps of the soldiers, the mechanical whir of the drones. She was trapped. A voice behind her spoke. Cold, confident. "Princess Zaira, your escape ends here." She turned slowly. A tall figure in black armor stood at the edge of the jungle. His helmet had a sharp crest, his eyes hidden behind a red visor. Commander Varric, her father's most loyal warrior. Zaira took a deep breath. "I will not return." Varric tilted his head. "You don't have a choice." He raised his hand. The drones moved forward, their weapons humming with energy. The soldiers raised their rifles. Zaira closed her eyes for a moment. This is the end. Then, a gunshot. One of the drones exploded into fire and metal. Then another, and another. The soldiers turned, confused. A shadow moved through the jungle. Fast, unseen. More shots, more destruction. The soldiers shouted in panic. The red glow of their visors flickered as one by one. They fell. Varric snarled, stepping forward. "Who dares?" A figure dropped from the trees. A human, dressed in dark, tactical armor. A rifle in one hand, a combat knife in the other. His face was sharp, his eyes cold. He moved fast, too fast. Before Varric could react, the human was already there. A single strike, quick, brutal, sent Varric crashing to the ground. Silence. Zaira stared in shock. A human. She had always been told humans were weak, unimportant. They were a small species, barely surviving in the galaxy. And yet, this one had just taken down an elite Imperial warrior, like it was nothing. The human turned to her. "Can you walk?" She hesitated, then nodded. He jerked his head toward the trees. "Then move. More will come." Zaira didn't know why, but she followed. They ran through the jungle, deeper and deeper, until they reached a small, hidden spacecraft. The human motioned for her to get inside. Zaira turned to him, still breathless. "Who are you?" He looked at her for a moment. His voice was calm, but firm. "My name is Jack, and if you want to survive, you better trust me." As the ship's engines roared to life, Zaira glanced back at the jungle. Varric was nowhere to be seen, but she knew this was far from over. Her own people wanted her dead, and now, for some reason, a human was risking his life to help her. Why? She didn't know, but she was about to find out. The human warrior, the small spacecraft, shot through the dense clouds, escaping the red jungle below. The engines hummed softly, cutting through the silence that had fallen inside the ship. Zaira sat stiffly on the edge of a seat, her fingers gripping the torn fabric of her cloak. She could still feel the heat of the battle, the sound of the hunter drones exploding, the way that human, Jack, had moved. Now she was sitting beside him, inside a ship that smelled of oil, metal, and something else, something human. Jack sat across from her, silent, checking his weapons. His dark tactical armor had scratches, scars from many fights. His hands moved efficiently, reloading a strange-looking rifle. Zara had seen thousands of warriors in her life. Imperial soldiers, elite assassins, warlords from distant worlds. But there was something different about this one. He was calm. Too calm. She cleared her throat. "Where are we going?" Jack didn't look up. "Somewhere safe." Zara narrowed her eyes. "You didn't answer my question." Jack finally met her gaze. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "You're alive, aren't you? That's all that matters." Zara felt a flare of frustration. She had just been hunted like an animal by her own people. Now she was sitting in a ship with a human mercenary who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her. She folded her arms. "You expect me to trust you just like that?" Jack smirked, leaning back in his seat. "No, but you don't have a choice, do you?" Silence. He was right. The ship broke through the atmosphere, entering the cold void of space. Through the front window, Tyra could see the stars stretching endlessly. They were heading toward a distant asteroid field, hidden deep in a sector that no empire dared to claim. Tyra studied Jack. She had heard stories of humans before. They were considered a minor race, not important in galactic politics. Weak, uncivilized, a species barely worth mentioning. And yet, this human had just taken down an entire team of Imperial hunters without breaking a sweat. Something wasn't right. She leaned forward. "Who are you really?" Jack sighed, rubbing his forehead. "We're not doing this now." Zara's voice sharpened. "You saved me. Why? What do you want from me?" Jack's eyes flashed with something unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke. "Your people tried to wipe out mine." Zara blinked. "What?" Jack exhaled slowly. "The Great Zelfar Empire. Your father's empire. It conquered hundreds of planets, enslaved species, destroyed entire civilizations. You probably don't even know half of it." Zara stiffened. She had heard whispers of war, of conquered planets, but she had never seen it with her own eyes. Jack's voice was low, controlled. One of those planets was Earth. Zara's breath caught. Earth. The name was familiar. It had been a small, forgotten war. The Emperor had ordered an attack on the Terran colonies, claiming they were a threat. No one in the royal courts had cared. The humans were weak after all. They wouldn't last long. Zara swallowed. I didn't know." Jack's jaw tightened. "Of course you didn't." For the first time, Zara saw something else in his eyes, something she didn't expect. Pain. She looked down. Her people had destroyed his, and now he had saved her. She forced herself to speak. "If you hate the Empire so much, why did you help me?" Jack didn't answer right away. Then he leaned forward, staring at her with cold, piercing eyes. "Because I don't like bullies." The ship landed inside a massive asteroid, hidden within a hollow cavern. The docking lights flickered on as Jack powered down the engines. Zara followed him down the ramp, stepping into what looked like an abandoned smuggler's base. The air smelled of rust and stale oxygen. Old cargo crates were scattered around, and flickering lights lined the metal walls. Jack walked ahead, tapping a few controls on a screen. A holographic map flickered to life, displaying the Zelfar Empire's territories. Zara felt a chill as she saw the red zones, marking war-torn planets, restricted military bases, and occupied worlds. Jack turned to her. "Your father put a bounty on you." Zara's stomach twisted. She had expected this. Jack continued. "And it's not just your father. Every bounty hunter in the galaxy is looking for you. You're worth more than a warship." Zara clenched her fists. "I will not go back." Jack studied her for a long moment. Then he tossed a small device onto the table. It flickered to life, showing a live broadcast from the Imperial network. The Emperor's voice echoed through the base. To all warriors of the Empire, my daughter is a traitor. She has dishonored her bloodline and betrayed her people. She must be captured, dead or alive. Zyra's blood went cold. He truly wants me dead. Jack crossed his arms. You should have expected that. She looked at him. And what about you? What will you do? Jack's expression was unreadable. That depends. What are you willing to do to survive? Zyra straightened. She had spent her entire life being told what to do, following orders, obeying traditions. But now she was alone. No royal guards, no servants, no family. She met Jack's gaze, fire burning in her chest. Whatever it takes. Jack gave a small, approving nod. Then let's get to work. Hunted across the stars. The smuggler's base inside the asteroid was dimly lit, the flickering blue glow of old monitors casting long shadows across the metal walls. The silence between Jack and Zyra was heavy. The Emperor's voice from the broadcast still rang in her ears. My daughter is a traitor. She must be captured, dead or alive. Her own father had sentenced her to death. Jack leaned against the control panel, arms crossed, eyes sharp as he studied her. They won't stop coming. Zyra exhaled, trying to steady herself. I know. Jack tapped a few controls, pulling up a holographic map of the sector. Your father's bounty has spread fast. In less than an hour, every bounty hunter, assassin, and mercenary in the Outer Rim will be looking for you. And we're sitting in the middle of a system filled with people who'd sell us out for a decent meal. Zyra frowned. Then why are we still here? Jack smirked. Because I had to see if you break first. Zyra clenched her fists, but before she could respond, the base's alert system blared to life. Incoming ship, EETCTED. Jack cursed under his breath and rushed to the control panel. Zyra moved beside him, eyes scanning the readout. A small stealth-class fighter had just entered the asteroid field, moving carefully through the debris. Jack's fingers moved fast. He pulled up the ship ID codes. Then his face darkened. Damn it. We need to go. Now. Zyra's stomach twisted. Who is it? Jack turned to her, voice cold. A bounty hunter. And not just any bounty hunter. This one is good. The hunter arrives. The ship shook as Jack sprinted to the pilot's seat, powering up the engines. The old smuggler's base groaned as metal plates vibrated under the force of the thrusters. Zyra strapped herself into the co-pilot's chair as Jack muttered under his breath. I hate bounty hunters. The screen showed a black and red starfighter, sleek and predatory, weaving through the asteroid field. The pilot was careful, methodical, not rushing. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to look. Then suddenly, a warning shot slammed into the asteroid base. Zyra's heart pounded. They found us. Jack's hands moved fast. He flicked a switch, and the ship's stealth shielding flickered to life. The power hummed low, the screens darkened. Their ship was now nearly invisible to sensors, blending with the asteroid. Zyra held her breath. Outside, the bounty hunter's ship slowed. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, a transmission crackled through. A distorted voice spoke. I know you're in there. Zyra's blood ran cold. The bounty hunter's voice was smooth, almost amused. A lot of people are looking for you, princess. You're worth a fortune. Jack didn't respond. He barely moved. His eyes remained locked on the screens, waiting, hunting the hunter. The bounty hunter continued. Come out now, and maybe I won't kill your new friend. Zyra gritted her teeth. They knew about Jack. Jack's fingers twitched toward the controls. His voice was low. On my signal, hold tight. Zyra didn't know what he was planning, but she nodded. The bounty hunter sighed. Fine. We do this the hard way. Suddenly, the bounty hunter's ship opened fire. Rocks exploded. The asteroid base shook violently. chunks of metal and debris flying in all directions. Jack didn't wait. Now, he slammed the throttle forward, and their ship burst out of the asteroid, engines roaring to full power. The chase. Their ship twisted through the asteroid field, weaving between spinning rocks and debris as the bounty hunter gave chase. Jack's ship spun to the side, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of ice. The bounty hunter was right behind them, lasers firing. Zara gripped the edges of her seat. They're gaining on us. Jack gritted his teeth. Not for long. He suddenly cut the engines, flipping the ship backward in midair, a move no Imperial pilot would ever attempt. For a split second, the bounty hunter's ship shot past them, exposed. Jack fired a precise shot, hitting the bounty hunter's thrusters. Boom! Their pursuer's engines flared with fire and sparks. The bounty hunter's ship spun out of control, crashing into a nearby asteroid. Jack smirked. Amateur. Zara exhaled sharply. They had survived. Barely. Jack immediately set the coordinates for a jump. We need to get to a safe zone before someone else finds us. Asterisk asterisk. The ship rumbled as it charged its warp drive. Zara turned to Jack, still catching her breath. You knew that maneuver would work. Jack grinned. Not really. But it was fun, wasn't it? Before she could reply, the ship jumped into hyperspace. A moment of truth. Inside the quiet hum of hyperspace, Zara finally relaxed. Slumping in her seat, she turned to Jack, watching as he casually checked the ship's systems, completely unfazed. She studied him carefully. This human, he was different. Her people saw humans as weak, as an afterthought in the grand design of the Empire. But here he was, a lone warrior, capable of defeating Imperial hunters and skilled bounty killers. She finally spoke. You're not just a mercenary, are you? Jack's hands froze for a second before he resumed working. I never said I was. Zara leaned forward. Then what are you? Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Right now, the only friend you've got. She held his gaze. That wasn't an answer. But before she could push him further, the ship's system beeped. Inugu transmission, RECIVE. Jack frowned and opened the message. A holographic image appeared, a shadowy figure in a dark hood. The voice was low, distorted. The Empire is moving. Your time is running out. Jack's face darkened. Zara felt a chill down her spine. Who was this? And what did they know? Jack shut off the transmission and turned to her. We need to move. Now. Zara nodded, her mind racing. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. Secrets of the human past. The hum of hyperspace filled the cockpit, a steady rhythm that should have been calming. But inside the dimly lit ship, tension hung thick in the air. Zara sat stiffly in the co-pilot's seat, eyes locked on Jack as he leaned back, staring at the holographic screen where the mysterious message had just played. The Empire is moving. Your time is running out. The distorted voice echoed in her mind. Who had sent it? How did they know where they were? Jack's jaw was tight, his fingers drumming against the console. Zara had noticed something about him. He rarely showed fear, but right now he looked troubled. She folded her arms. That message. You recognized the voice, didn't you? Jack didn't respond immediately. He let out a slow breath, then finally said, Maybe. Zara frowned. That's not an answer. Jack shot her a sideways glance. And you still haven't told me why your father wants you dead. Silence. Zara clenched her fists. Because I refuse to commit genocide. Jack raised an eyebrow. That's a hell of a thing to refuse. She exhaled, forcing herself to stay calm. The Emperor ordered me to wipe out an entire colony of rebels. Families. Children. He wanted me to prove my loyalty by killing innocents. Her voice hardened. I wouldn't do it. Jack studied her for a moment, then nodded slightly. Well, at least you have a conscience. That's rare for your kind. Zahra narrowed her eyes. You say that like you know my kind. Jack exhaled and leaned forward, typing coordinates into the navigation system. The ship changed course, adjusting slightly. Zahra tilted her head. Where are we going? Jack's voice was quiet. Somewhere I never wanted to go again. A forgotten battlefield. The ship dropped out of hyperspace near a distant, abandoned world. A dead planet. Zahra watched as the surface below came into view, a wasteland of ruins and twisted metal, covered in the scars of an ancient war. Jack's hands were tight around the controls. He wasn't looking at her. His focus was locked on the planet below. Zahra felt a strange unease. What is this place? Jack's voice was distant, almost hollow. Earth. Zahra's breath caught. Earth. The human homeworld. Or at least, what was left of it. The ship landed among the ruins of a city, metal and stone crushed together in the remains of what must have once been towering skyscrapers. The air was heavy, thick with dust and silence. Zahra followed Jack as he stepped out onto the cracked pavement, his boots crunching against broken glass. Zahra turned slowly, trying to imagine what this place must have been before. The human cities had been massive, powerful, but now, nothing but ghosts. Jack walked forward, stopping at a rusted-out war machine, its cannons long dead. He ran a hand along the metal, almost absent-mindedly. Zahra hesitated. Then, quietly, she asked, "What happened here?" Jack exhaled slowly, his fingers tightening against the cold steel. The Empire happened. He turned, gesturing to the ruins. 100 years ago, the Emperor decided humans were dangerous. Not because we had the biggest army or the strongest weapons, but because we wouldn't bow. We wouldn't kneel to his rule. Zahra swallowed hard. I never knew. Jack chuckled bitterly. Of course you didn't. They erased us from history. He gestured around him. This was one of our last cities. We fought until the last man, but the Empire didn't fight fair. They used orbital weapons, wiped out entire continents in minutes. Zahra felt a sick twist in her stomach. They told us Earth was a failed world, that it was abandoned long before the Empire arrived. Jack scoffed. Lies. They turned my planet into a graveyard. He stepped forward, pointing at something ahead. But they didn't kill all of us. Zahra followed his gaze and froze. A row of massive cryopods stood half-buried in the ruins, covered in dust and ice. Hundreds of them. Her breath caught. What are these? Jack walked up to one, wiping away frost from the glass. Inside, a human soldier lay frozen, armored in black tactical gear. Jack's voice was quiet, almost reverent. The last of Earth's warriors. Zahra's pulse raced. Your people, they're still alive. Jack nodded. We knew we couldn't win against the Empire's fleet, so we did the only thing we could. We hid. We waited. Zahra felt her heart pounding. How many of you are there? Jack exhaled. Enough. She suddenly understood. The Empire thought humans were extinct. But they were wrong. Jack wasn't just a mercenary. He was a survivor, a soldier from a war the Empire thought was over. And now, the last warriors of Earth were still out there, waiting for a day when they would rise again. The awakening. Jack pressed a sequence of buttons on a control panel beside one of the pods. It hissed, steam pouring out as the glass cracked open. Zahra took a step back, heart racing. The soldier inside stirred, his eyes flickering open for the first time in decades. Slowly, he turned his head toward Jack. His voice was hoarse, dry from years of silence. How long? Jack's voice was steady. Too long. The soldier exhaled, looking past Jack, his gaze landing on Zahra. Zahra felt a shiver run down her spine. His eyes were cold, calculating. A soldier's eyes. The man tilted his head. You brought an Imperial. Jack didn't flinch. She's not with them anymore. The soldier studied her for a long moment. then nodded slightly. "We'll see." More pods began to unlock. More soldiers waking from a sleep they had been trapped in for decades. Zyra's breath caught as realization hit her. The Empire believed humanity was gone. But they were still here. And they were going to fight back. She looked at Jack. For the first time, she saw him not just as a rogue warrior, not just as a mercenary. She saw him for what he truly was. A spark, a leader, a survivor who was about to change the course of history. Jack turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Still think humans are weak?" Zyra swallowed hard. Not anymore. The betrayal and the revelation. The air inside the ruined city was thick with tension. The hiss of thawing cryopods filled the silence, and one by one, the last warriors of Earth awakened. Their breaths were ragged, their muscles stiff from decades of sleep, but their eyes burned with purpose. Zyra stood among them, uneasy. These were not ordinary humans. They were soldiers, survivors of a genocide her father had ordered. And now they were waking up in a world where the Empire still ruled. Jack moved among them, speaking in low tones, giving orders, reuniting with his own. He belonged here, among these warriors of the past. Zyra, however, felt like a shadow among ghosts. A grizzled man, taller than Jack, stepped forward. His voice was hoarse, but strong. "How bad is it?" Jack exhaled. "Worse than we imagined, Marshal. The Empire spread further than we thought. And now," his jaw clenched, "they know we're still alive." Marshal's sharp gaze landed on Zyra. "Because of her?" Zyra stiffened. She had seen that look before, the look of a man who saw her only as an enemy. Jack's voice was firm. "She's not one of them anymore." Marshal didn't look convinced. He crossed his arms. "And you trust her?" Jack didn't hesitate. "I trust that she wants the Emperor dead as much as we do." That was the only thing keeping her alive right now. A dangerous alliance. The warriors gathered in the broken ruins of an old military command center. The holographic table flickered to life, displaying a detailed map of the Imperial fleet movements. Jack leaned forward. "The Emperor put a bounty on Zyra. That means we don't have time. Every bounty hunter and warlord in the galaxy will be looking for us." One of the soldiers, a woman with a cybernetic eye, scoffed. "Then why keep her here?" Zyra met her gaze. "Because I know the Empire's weaknesses." The room fell silent. Zyra stepped forward, staring at the map. "I spent my life studying the military forces of the Empire. I know which stations are weakest, where the blind spots are. And I know one thing your people never did." Jack's brow furrowed. "Which is?" Zyra turned to him. "The Emperor is afraid of something." That got their attention. Marshal narrowed his eyes. "The Emperor fears nothing." Zyra shook her head. "You're wrong. He has always been afraid of something. Something he kept secret, even from his closest generals." Jack leaned forward. "And you know what it is?" Zyra hesitated. Then, in a whisper, she said, "A weapon." Silence. Jack's expression darkened. "What kind of weapon?" Zyra swallowed hard. "One that could wipe out entire worlds in an instant. One that he's never used because even he is afraid of it." Jack exhaled sharply. "Then we need to find it first." Marshal frowned. "That's a suicide mission." Jack smirked. "That's never stopped us before." The betrayal. The plan was set. They would leave the ruined city and head toward an old outpost where Zyra believed the Emperor's secret weapon might be hidden. It was dangerous. But if they could find it, they could turn the war against the Empire before it even began. The warriors packed supplies. Jack refueled the ship. Zyra studied the maps, preparing herself. But something felt off. She noticed Marshal watching her too closely. Not just suspicion. Something else. Like he was waiting for something. And then, the alarm blared. Jack spun around. What the hell? Incoming Tyrannus Mission, Imperial Channel. Zyra's stomach dropped. A hologram flickered to life. A man in high-ranking Imperial armor appeared. A cold voice echoed through the ruins. You have something that belongs to me. Jack's face twisted in anger. Varric. Zyra's heart pounded. Varric, the Emperor's most ruthless warrior. The man who had nearly captured her back on the jungle world. Varric smirked. Surrender the traitor, and perhaps I will let the rest of you die quickly. Zyra's blood ran cold. Jack turned to Marshall. You sent the signal. Marshall didn't deny it. We can't fight the Empire, Jack. Not with our numbers. But if we turn her in, we get a deal. A chance to rebuild. Zyra took a step back. You betrayed us. Marshall's gaze was hard. No, Princess. I just chose the winning side. Explosions rosiki the ruins. Imperial ships descended from the sky, firing on the city. Jack grabbed Zyra's wrist. We need to move. Now. Zyra hesitated. Marshall had betrayed them. But the other warriors, the soldiers waking from their cryo-sleep, would they fight? Or would they surrender? Jack pulled her forward. Don't think. Just run. A fight for survival. Blaster fire rained down from the sky. Jack and Zyra sprinted through the ruins as Imperial forces stormed in. The last warriors of Earth opened fire, engaging in battle for the first time in decades. Zyra turned, grabbing a fallen rifle. She fired at the Imperial troops, covering Jack's back. Boom! A building collapsed as Imperial warships strafed the city. Jack dove behind cover, gripping his communicator. We need an evac now. The ship's AI crackled. Engines are hot. ETA, 2 minutes. Zyra ducked as a plasma bolt whizzed past her. She turned and froze. Varric was here. The Imperial commander strode through the battlefield, a massive energy sword in one hand, his crimson armor untouched by the chaos around him. His golden eyes locked onto Zyra. This ends now, Princess. Jack cursed. Go, get to the ship. But Zyra stood her ground. She was done running. She raised her weapon. If you want me, Varric, come take me. Varric grinned, stepping forward. Gladly. And then, he lunged. The human strikes back. The battlefield burned. Smoke and fire twisted into the air as the last warriors of Earth fought desperately against the Imperial invasion. Explosions rattled the ruins, the sky choked with warships, their cannons raining down destruction. And in the center of it all, Zyra and Varric. The Imperial commander's golden eyes locked onto hers. His massive energy soared, humming with power. His stance was perfect, a lifetime of training shaping every movement. Zyra held her ground, gripping the stolen rifle tight. Her heart pounded, but she refused to show fear. No more running. Varric smirked. Brave, but foolish. Then, he moved. A blur of speed, a flash of steel. Zyra barely dodged as the sword sliced through the air, the force of the swing shattering the stone behind her. She rolled, fired a burst from her rifle. But Varric was faster. He spun, deflecting the shots with his sword, closing the distance in an instant. A kick to her stomach sent her flying. She hit the ground hard, gasping for air. Varric loomed over her, his sword raised. You are unworthy of your bloodline. Zyra gritted her teeth. Then I'll make a new one. A sudden gunshot cracked the air. Varric's blade was knocked off course as Jack fired from the rooftop, his sniper rifle sending sparks flying from Varric's armor. Get up, Princess, Jack shouted. This bastard isn't worth dying for. Zyra rolled just as Varric whirled toward Jack, his face dark with fury. You again, he growled. Jack reloaded, smirking. Miss me. Varric lunged, leaping impossibly high toward the rooftop. But Jack was already gone, dropping into the shadows below. The momentary distraction gave Syra the chance she needed. She scrambled to her feet, her mind racing. She couldn't beat Varric in brute force, but maybe. She didn't have to. She sprinted toward the old military console, dodging plasma fire from nearby troopers. Her fingers flew over the keys, overriding security systems. Come on. Come on. Defense PUR2COLs activate. The ruined city roared to life. Old automated turrets unfolded from the rubble, scanning for targets and locking onto the Empire's forces. Gunfire erupted from the ruins as long-dormant defenses opened fire. Imperial soldiers fell in an instant, caught in the crossfire. Jack whistled. Not bad, Princess. Syra smirked. Told you I knew the Empire's weaknesses. Varric growled, his golden eyes flashing with rage. He raised his gauntlet, activating his personal shield as the turrets locked onto him. Cowards hide behind machines. A true warrior fights with steel. Jack grinned, stepping beside Syra, gun in hand. Good thing we're not warriors then. They opened fire. Escape to the stars. The battle was chaos. The last warriors of Earth fought back fiercely, their long-lost training awakening in the heat of combat. They moved with precision, outmaneuvering the Imperial troops, turning their own weapons against them. But the Empire had numbers. For every trooper that fell, more took their place. For every warship they shot down, another loomed from the sky. Jack gritted his teeth. We can't hold this place. Syra knew he was right. This wasn't a war they could win today. But they could survive. She turned to Jack. Get your people to the ship. I have one more thing to do. Jack frowned. Syra, go. Jack hesitated, but then nodded. Don't die, Princess. Asterisk. Syra sprinted toward the control tower, dodging falling debris and plasma fire. She had seen something in the system, something deeply buried in the ruins' old archives. Something her father had tried to erase. She reached the console, typing fast. ACCSSing hidden FILES. A flickering hologram appeared. A secret Imperial facility. Coordinates, locations, security codes. Her breath caught. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something more. Something powerful enough that even the Emperor was afraid of it. She copied the data onto a small drive and turned just as a massive explosion ripped through the ruins. The ground shook violently. Varric was coming. She bolted. The ship's engines were already roaring to life as the last of the warriors boarded. Jack stood at the ramp, covering her with his rifle. Move, Syra. She leaped onto the ship as blaster fire streaked past her. The ship lifted off, engines burning hot, as they shot into the sky. Below, the ruins of Earth burned. Varric stood amid the fire, watching as they escaped. His golden eyes glowed with fury. He wouldn't forget this. He wouldn't stop hunting them. But for now, they were free. A new war begins. The ship drifted through space, the stars stretching endlessly beyond. Syra sat in the cockpit, staring at the small drive in her hands. The secret her father had hidden. Jack leaned against the door. You gonna tell me what you found? Syra swallowed. The Empire has a secret facility. Something dangerous. Something even my father was afraid of. Jack frowned. And you think we can use it? Syra looked up, meeting his gaze. I think it's the key to ending the Empire. Jack exhaled, then smirked. Well then, let's go steal it. She smiled. For the first time in her life, she wasn't a princess. She wasn't a fugitive. She was a fighter. And the war was just beginning. The rise of a new future. The ship hurtled through hyperspace, its engines humming softly. The chaos of the battle on Earth was behind them, but the war was far from over. Syra sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the small data drive in her hands. It was warm from the energy pulse that had copied the files from the ruined archives, but it felt heavier than it should be. This was it, the Emperor's secret, the thing he feared most. Jack sat across from her, arms crossed, his sharp eyes locked on the drive. "Are you going to tell me what's on that thing, or are we playing the suspense game?" Sarah took a deep breath, then slid the drive into the ship's console. ACCSSIN in HFY. The holographic screen flickered to life. Coordinates. An unmarked star system, far beyond the Empire's usual borders. It wasn't on any known map, hidden so well that even the most advanced scanners wouldn't detect it. Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed. What the hell is out there? Zara clicked on the next file. A series of blueprints flashed onto the screen. Jack's breath caught. It wasn't a weapon. It was a prison. A massive facility built on a dead planet, surrounded by a black void in space. Shielded, hidden, guarded by the Empire's most powerful forces. Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is where my father keeps the things that scare him." Jack frowned. "You mean political prisoners? Rebels?" Zara shook her head. "No." She clicked on another file. Sub-GCTCLA-SCIFICHIN. Extreme 3AT to the Empire. The next image made Jack's blood run cold. The screen displayed humans. Hundreds, maybe thousands, kept in containment. Cryostasis. Jack's jaw clenched. Impossible. I thought we were the only ones left. Syra looked at him, her expression grim. "My father didn't wipe out all of your people. He kept some of them. Experimented on them. He wanted to understand why humans were so dangerous." Jack exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. His mind was racing. The Empire had spent centuries underestimating humans, until they fought back, until they refused to surrender. And now the Emperor's greatest fear was locked away in a secret facility. Jack leaned back, shaking his head. "So that's it. We break in, rescue them, and start a war." Styra didn't hesitate. Yes. The last prison. The journey to the unmarked system took 3 days. 3 days of preparing, of gathering supplies, of trying to figure out how to take on an entire Imperial fortress with a single ship. Jack called it suicidal. Zara called it necessary. Finally, they dropped out of hyperspace. A dead planet loomed before them. Its surface was cracked and lifeless, the color of burned stone. And in the center of it, buried beneath layers of rock and metal, the prison. Jack whistled under his breath. "Damn, that's a fortress, all right." Zyra's fingers danced across the controls, scanning the base. Massive shield generators, orbital defense cannons, security drones. No obvious weak spots. Jack sighed. Figures. Zyra turned to him. "We don't need to fight our way in." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Then what? We knock." Zyra smirked. "No, we let them open the door for us." Jack blinked. "You're insane." She just grinned. "Trust me." Breaking the unbreakable. They sent out a distress signal, one carrying Syra's personal royal identification code. It took less than 10 minutes for the prison's security to respond. "Imperial transmission incoming." A voice crackled through the ship's speakers. "State your purpose, Princess Tyra." She straightened, forcing authority into her voice. "I am here on direct orders from the Emperor. Open the gates immediately." Silence. Jack gave her a look. "You really think they're going to fall for?" "Docking bay access is guaranteed." Jack's jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding me." Zyra smirked. "Welcome to the perks of being a princess." Jack shook his head. "I take back everything I said. I like this plan." The storm breaks. The ship landed inside the prison's massive docking bay. Imperial soldiers in dark armor stood at attention, waiting for her. Zara stepped forward, her head held high, her voice cold. "Take me to the prisoners. Now." The guards hesitated, then obeyed. They walked through dark, sterile halls, past endless rows of locked doors. Thyra's stomach twisted. This place was a graveyard. Finally, they'd reached the cryo chamber. Jack's breath caught as he saw them. Rows upon rows of humans, frozen in time. His people, his brothers, his family. Zira turned to the lead officer. "I will be taking them." The officer hesitated. "That is not possible, Princess." Zira smiled coldly. "Oh, I think it is." Then, a shot rang out. Jack moved before the guard could even react, spinning and firing in one smooth motion. The lead officer dropped, lifeless. Alarm activated. Security BREHH. The room exploded into chaos. Jack grabbed the nearest console, hacking into the system. "Gyra, get those pods open." She sprinted to the control panel, overriding the security locks. One by one, the cryopods began to thaw. Emergency release in PRGRESS. The first human warrior gasped as he woke, his eyes snapping open. Then another, and another. The room filled with the sounds of waking soldiers, their confusion giving way to pure rage as they saw their captors. Jack tossed a rifle to the nearest one. "Time to wake up, boys. We've got an empire to burn." The soldiers didn't hesitate. They picked up weapons, and they fought. The prison erupted into war. Jack and Zira led the charge, blasting through the halls, cutting down Imperial troops as the newly freed warriors rose against their captors. It was the beginning of the end. The fall of the Empire. By the time they reached the ship, the entire facility was in flames. Hundreds of freed human soldiers boarded, weapons in hand, ready for war. Jack stood at the edge of the ramp, staring back at the burning prison. His past, his pain. Then he turned to Zira. "This is it. This is how it begins." Zira nodded. "No more running. No more hiding." Jack grinned, gripping his rifle. "Then let's go start a rebellion." The ship launched into the sky. The last warriors of Earth had returned, and the Empire's reign was about to end.